All right, cool. All right, so everybody appreciate you guys hopping on the call today. We're going to talk about sort of MDR and EDR and sort of what we've been putting together as part of our plan and kind of why we're doing this, which I think will be helpful. So this is you guys are all customers for the most part, so please feel free to thank you, manage detection and response. So you guys are all customers, so please feel free to hop in and ask any questions. I may have muted you. If that's the case, that's fine. Just simply unmute yourself or raise your hand or use the emoji if you guys are familiar with the Microsoft Teams stuff. Or simply just put your question in chat and then we'll kind of answer that question. So, the more engaged we can make this, the better. Just please feel free to ask any questions if you guys want. So today I'm joined with Nicole LaDue. She's been our account manager for years at this point with BlackPoint, and she's a phenomenal human being, and she helps us with all things SOC and cyber, particularly in regards to the way that we manage a lot of our endpoints. And so today we're going to talk about cybersecurity the proper way, and then sort of the new MDR cybersecurity solution. So let me just kind of jump into this. So we've actually been using BlackPoint internally for a very long time. And then what we've done is we've slowly over the years rolled it out to clients that had some sort of compliance need or some sort of regulatory need. And what we're seeing is that clients that were sort of targets that were sort of larger organizations, we're starting to see this trickle down to smaller and smaller organizations. And we've just decided as part of our operating mode and to do the right thing for our customers, we're going to basically turn this on. And so we're going to go over why we're doing this, and we'll share some data with you guys that I think is pretty critical. So there's a lot of changes that's happening in the cybersecurity sector, and we'll address those. The other thing we're going to talk about is specifically what an MDR is. Nicole's going to sort of enlighten us on kind of what that is, and then the difference between what we have now and what you guys have and what we're adding, and then how the MDR works. And then the other thing what we're going to tell you about is sort of some real world things that we've experienced that will hopefully put this in perspective of why we're doing this beyond just statistics and scaring you with cybersecurity stats. And again, like I mentioned, please stop, interrupt us at any time. Feel free to ask any questions that you want, and we'll make sure that this is part of what we're doing here. All right. So the evolving threat landscape. So in the old days when we started this, most of the malware and sort of stuff that you saw in the old days, it wasn't really designed to hurt organizations. Just a couple of kids that wrote some code and software that broke stuff, or people that would break into organizations to say that they could do it. And that has significantly changed, particularly with the rise of ransomware. We're seeing a lot more damage and intentional damage done to organizations because threat actors know they can, and know that they can collect a lot of money on the way out. So it's really become kind of a large scale criminal enterprise. I mean, these things are incredibly sophisticated. A lot of times they're backed by big Russian mafias. They'll have threat actors working out of Pakistan, China, these kids that are literally, dialing into stuff all day long. And then there's also on the flip side of that, these, kids that are just doing it to make money, just for the thrill of the hunt, and then they're just slashing and burning because they want to prove that they can do it. And so a lot of what we're seeing these days goes beyond traditional security methodologies that we felt worked in the past. We're seeing a lot of email compromise. That tends to still be the number one that these organizations get broken into, is simply clicking a link in your email. And then we can talk about some real world attack examples, some cloud-based attack examples. Nicole and I will share some stats on what we're seeing independently of each other. A lot of the stuff isn't even about malware anymore. It's about controlling your assets and locking you out of stuff, which we've seen. And then small business, right? So I think one of the things that a lot of people still assume is like, oh, I'm super small, it doesn't matter. That's exactly why you matter, right? Because you don't have the resources to really protect things effectively. And because of that, these threat actors are targeting smaller and smaller organizations where it's just a slam dunk. They break in, lock you out of your stuff, and they can collect money because it's not even worth the time or energy. And you may not even have a cybersecurity policy in the first place, right? And then the other thing that we're seeing too is the use of AI. I've gotten spoofed a couple of times with some very, very smart, well-written and crafted emails that almost looked authentic, as well as phone calls that sounded like people that I thought I knew. And if that's happening to me, it's only a matter of time before it starts happening to you guys as well. All right. All right. So this is a stat. We just did a talk with TechRug, which is an insurance underwriter, as well as BlackPoint a couple weeks ago. The average cost of a cybersecurity event right now is $264,000, right? And not all cybersecurity events are created equal. You can see that big tall one on the left-hand side. That's ransomware. The average cost of a ransomware event for a small business is roughly $631,000. That's significantly higher than it was simply 2 years ago. And the reason we're seeing that is because a lot of times these threat actors are getting into an environment, sticking around for the long haul, figuring out how they can maximize damage, destroy backups, and then really hammering it in at the end. The other thing, which is on the far right, is that $171,000 is a wire transfer fraud. So anybody that's working in a finance department from an accounting perspective, accounts payable, accounts receivable, you are by default a target of these guys. And they are very, very crafty in the way that they sort of put these emails together. In fact, one of the best things that we've seen, one of the most clever things that we see is they'll literally take over an account, stay in there for several months, figure out what the patterns are, what the invoices look like, and they will literally recraft a new invoice and send it on the behalf of a legitimate organization. They're not in this for the short game. They're in here for the long game. Once they get in your Microsoft Office 365 tenant, they're waiting and playing the game. And we'll talk about a real world story there too. A couple things just to take away from this. $264,000 is the average, but it can ransomware is obviously the most expensive, and email compromise and wire transfer fraud. They can all be pretty pricey. Attack likelihood, right? So, all right, who cares, right? So, look, what are the odds that this stuff is actually going to happen to me? So, Hiscox is a cybersecurity response firm. They're based out of Ireland. They did a big study for 7 countries in 2025, right? They did France, 3 countries in the UK, United States, Canada, and it might have been Spain. I forget what the other data set was. Of that, 6,000 people that responded, 59% experienced a cybersecurity attack, and 27% of those were ransomware, right? So if you think about this on a line scale, right, it's just a matter of time. So 50% chance that something's going to happen this year, and of that 50%, 25%. So that means 12.5% chance each year that you're going to get hit by ransomware. That's now, right? And 98% of all claims across the entire insurance sector were from organizations with less than $2 billion in revenue. So this is really affecting small to mid-sized enterprises. It's no longer affecting the Fortune 500 the way that we normally see. Rise of ransomware. So every year, Verizon puts out a report called the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. DBIR is what it's called. Very highly regarded across the sector. Most cybersecurity companies will reference this document. 37% increase year over year. And it was present in 44% of all of the breaches that Verizon reported in 2025, right? Or 2024. So small to medium-sized businesses experience ransomware to the tune of 88% overall. So there's always some sort of ransomware component in this, as you can guess, because it's so lucrative for these threat actors to try to deploy it, right? So that's just one aspect. I'm not trying to bang on ransomware, but we're seeing threats across all cycles happen, with the ultimate payload being this ransomware. And now we're going to kind of pivot to sort of what is managed detection response. All right, Nicole, you want
to? Yeah, sure. Yeah,
thank
you so much. Definitely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And also want to say congratulations for being a customer of Proper Sky, because they are amazing at what they do. They're an amazing MSP. And, the fact that they're so good at what they do is kind of why they're putting something like this in place. As Jim mentioned, we're at a point now where and I don't even like to call them hackers, really. These are criminals, and Jim referred to them as criminals earlier in the presentation, because these are real people that are very good at what they do. They make a ton of money doing what they do. They're extremely, focused on it. This is what they do, 9 to 5, if you will. And, they're good at it. So we all need to be very aware that they're real. I feel like movies and stuff like that, we see these people in the movies, and they don't really seem like they're actually, out there, but they really are. And they are definitely hitting, all of the organizations, no matter your industry, no matter your size. A lot of times when it comes to how they're targeting companies, it doesn't even necessarily have to do with, the size of the company or the industry. It's really more just a cash grab, random. They're just trying to, get out there and hit as many companies as they possibly can, because that's how they're going to make as much money as they possibly can. So yeah, it's great that you all are customers of Proper Sky, because you are now, going to be very protected against this kind of thing. So yes, that brings me to what is managed detection and response, or MDR is kind of what we refer to it. I know cybersecurity industry, so many acronyms. There's a new one every day. But MDR, so what that is essentially it's taking, obviously the security tools that you have in place already. So you all, as customers of Proper Sky, you have an EDR in place, which is going to be endpoint detection and response. And, that's going to pick up on kind of your most basic, like malware type attacks, file-based type attacks. And then you might have your email security. You're going to have all these layers in place. MFA, things that are going to hopefully make it very difficult for those criminals to get into your networks. But what MDR does is it adds on kind of the human element, and not only that, but also the 24/7 element. So, if you have all these tools that are great at picking up on, whatever it is, whatever type of attack is happening, that's one thing. That's great. But the thing is that most of the time when these criminals are doing these activities, whether it's logging into your M365 account or getting onto your desktop and trying to spread throughout the network, typically they're going to be doing these things in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. This Friday night is Halloween. I'm very, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some kind of event that ends up happening. Because it's a weekend, it's a holiday, people are going to be out, having fun, giving out candy, chasing their kids around if you're Jim. So you need to have human analysts that are watching for this activity 24/7. So that's weekends, holidays, middle of the night. You have to have somebody that is watching for this activity. And, I'm talking about looking at the activity that's being pulled in from all those security tools that you have in place, but then also looking for the activity that a criminal is going to do. When they get into a network, a lot of times all they're going to do is just use the tools that are built into your operating system. So these are legitimate IT tools that we all use, even if you're just somebody who works, maybe in finance, or maybe you're somebody who works in HR, you're not a hacker, but you do have tools built into your computer and your operating system that hackers can use to leverage to move around within an environment. And as you can imagine, if a hacker is using a legitimate IT tool to do something in the environment, that looks like normal admin behavior. It looks like, oh, Jenny in accounting is just working late tonight and, she's doing some stuff. But if you have a human being, a SOC analyst, and SOC is Security Operations Center, you have somebody who really knows what to look for, understands the methods that these hackers use. We will see that activity and we will put the context together to determine that this does not look right. Jenny typically isn't going to be working this late. Jenny isn't typically going to be using this tool, because she does financial things. Or sometimes we see, on the M365 side, maybe we see somebody logging in from a strange place, a strange country. Maybe they set up a forwarding rule. So that's something that they do pretty commonly. They'll get access to a user account in M365 and they'll set up a forwarding role so that they're getting copies of all of your emails, which of course they can then use to, gain more information about your company. And then they can maybe go out and put together a much better, phishing campaign based on that information. Or they can send emails from that user account. So let's just say that, Jim had his user account get breached. And then Jim, sends an email to his financial department saying, hey, please, wire this money to me at this place. They trust it. It's Jim. It's his email. There's no reason not to trust that. Hopefully we were all doing training and we know that we should always reach out to Jim first before we wire that money. But these are the things that are happening. And so you really need to have that 24/7 human being analysts watching for that activity and then responding to it. So another thing that really defines true managed detection and response is that when that hacker activity is seen, someone is actually going to respond to it. So when I say respond, I don't mean, hey, let's just send an alert. Let's send an alert to Jim and his team, or let's send an alert to the customer saying, hey, we saw this, here's some steps for you to take to do something about it. That's not enough, obviously. We're all hopefully, once again, out giving away candy, partying, whatever it is that we're doing. So you need to make sure that the MDR that you have in place is not just going to send an alert, but is also going to actually respond. So that means, if we see, once again, I'm going to bring up Jenny in accounting. Let's say that Jenny, we noticed some strange activity on her device. Our analyst is going to take that device offline, isolate it from the rest of the network, make sure that it cannot communicate with anything else in the network. And then we're going to pick up the phone and call and let whomever it is on the other end know, hey, this is what we saw, this is what we did. This is taken care of at this point, but here's some steps that you might need to do to get things remediated. And then on the M365 side, that would look like us disabling a user. We see Jim, somebody logged into Jim's account from, let's say, China and set up a forwarding email. We are going to disable Jim's account, kick them out, revoke all of their tokens, and then pick up the phone and call. So that is also a very important part of MDR. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
It's a great point, actually, Nicole. So when we first set up the relationship with BlackPoint, I was like hesitant, and I was like, okay, I want you guys to call us the second something happens. And you guys were responding within 2 to 3 minutes, calling my phone, way more than I expected. And now we actually changed our defaults. We actually tell BlackPoint to do what they think they should do and then call us, which is typically disabling the account, removing the endpoint from the network, because we have full confidence in what their SOC and the guys that are working these MDR products are actually doing. So I think that's a key point. And we'll talk about that in one of these examples here too.
Yep, absolutely. We always typically want to act first, call second, because time is of the essence. And I know, Jim, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, so that's the definition of what MDR is. Does anyone have any questions? Can I clarify anything about anything that I mentioned there? It's not a huge group today, so it's kind of nice. We can actually discuss things if anyone has any questions. Oh, can you talk more about what lateral movement means? Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So I'm gonna just kind of walk you all through really quick, kind of what a typical breach might look like to help me, define a little bit more about what lateral movement means. And I think, hopefully this is helpful. I feel like we hear pretty much all the time in the news, the breaches that are happening. We hear about the large companies that are getting breached. But they don't typically talk about, how the breaches actually happen and kind of the steps that the hacker actually took. Sometimes you might hear maybe how they got in or something, but you don't really know, like, what did they do after they got in? So a typical breach that, somebody gets into a network and then eventually deploys ransomware, or maybe they exfiltrate data, which means they're stealing data. These are just a couple of the missions that they might have. But the first phase of a breach is always going to be planning, and there's not a lot that we can do about that other than let's always make sure that, we're not sharing everything about ourselves and our company on LinkedIn and on social media and things like that, because we're just giving more information for those hackers to utilize against us and phishing campaigns and things like that. So first is planning. They are going to maybe do some password spraying, attempting to get in essentially. So once they are able to get in, so whether that's through a phishing email or some kind of, they've spoofed a browser, they're doing all kinds of crazy things these days. They get somebody to scan a QR code, who knows? There's so many things. So once they get into an environment, let's just say that I'm going to use, sorry, Jim, I'm going to use you as an example again. Let's just say that, Jim's desktop, a hacker gets access to it. So the first thing that they're going to try to do is figure out, who am I? From their perspective, they're not going to know much about where they've actually landed in the network. So the first thing they're going to do is try to figure out, who am I? Who is this person that I've landed? What kind of privilege does this person have? What kind of role are they in? What kind of connections do they have? And they're going to try to see, okay, what is in this environment that I can maybe use to move around? And then from there, they are going to try to move around. So when I'm talking about lateral movement, that's what I mean, is that they've landed on a device and they're going to try to laterally move through the environment to eventually get to where they need to go to accomplish their mission. Because typically, when they land on the first device, it's just going to probably be like a lower level, not a lot of privileges. They're not going to be able to really do anything that much. So they're going to need to maybe, move through the environment and get to somebody very much higher level, or maybe they're trying to get to a server, maybe they're trying to get to a domain controller. Essentially, they're going to be trying to spread throughout the environment. So that is what lateral movement is. And then after that, maybe they will try to deploy some kind of ransomware or malware. And that is where typically your antivirus or your EDR would step in and hopefully, quarantine that. But once again, a lot of times these hackers are in the environment for a pretty long period of time before they try to deploy any malware or ransomware. And so that's where we want to catch them. We want to catch them as soon as they get into that environment and before they start trying to laterally spread through the environment. Hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear about what lateral movement is. Any other questions? Makes sense. Cool. Awesome. And Jim, I don't know if you had anything else to add to the lateral movement conversation, but I can keep going.
Yeah, so I think one of the things people they're like, oh, they got special tools and they're going to use this super deluxe crazy stuff. And the reality is they're not. They're actually going to use off the shelf stuff like go to my PC and log me in anywhere. And all of a sudden you'll come in and PowerShell. Yeah, they'll hide the icons and you won't even know that they have access to your machine, right? And then they're able to get in. Now there are, custom tools and stuff like that, but a lot of times it's this shadow IT stuff that's just kind of on your computer and realize you have it. And that's what ended up that's what ends up getting used to sort of, scan the networks and stuff.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that these hackers are not using anything fancy really. They are just using what we have built into our operating systems, and it makes it easy. And a lot of these tools that they use, like they can go online and download them really easily for free. We all could become hackers pretty easily if we wanted to, because there's so many
tools.
It's
ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about, I talked about what MDR is. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Yeah, fire away.
Sorry. Hey, Jim. It's Cecily Bradford.
Hey, what's up, Cess?
Nothing much. I'm good to see you, by the way. I had a question. Jim was talking about the response of the organization when they noticed that there is a threat, and there was almost instant call out to their organization. As a kind of third party user, I'll say, and ProperSky being our intermediary, what does that look like for the leadership of the organization? The call is then going to Jim and his team, and not that this doesn't work or it hasn't worked, but then will the call go to the organization, or is there always going to be that intermediary? And kind of where does leadership need to play a role in making sure that we remain secure in something so immediate as that?
That's a great question. That's actually a really good question. So I'll answer a little bit, Nicole. So typically the way that this works is what we're seeing, Seth, is most of the time the attacks are happening after hours, right? So I'm in bed, you're in bed, whatever. And somebody like logs in from China into the Microsoft 365 tenant, or they do something. BlackPoint SOC will usually disable that account immediately. They'll send a ticket to us and they'll say, hey, we disabled this account. We're monitoring it. We reset the password. We revoked all the privileges for now. So we're letting you know that that's going to happen. And then they start calling, right? And so they call our help desk initially. And there's kind of like levels, right? So if they see something that's really dangerous, they'll actually start escalating the calls. And it eventually, believe it or not, will trickle up to my cell phone. On my cell phone, there are two phone calls, my son's diabetes number and BlackPoint's incident response team that actually go through my do not disturb. So if I get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, I know that something terrible is happening and we kind of hop up. So part of what we do is once we get that information, if it's innocuous, where it's like, hey, somebody got access to somebody's account, they sent out about 100 emails, we locked them down, we'll get up first thing in the morning, and that ticket comes in as high priority, and we dive right into that. And then we're going to reach out to the leadership team and say, hey, listen, Michael's account was hacked last night. We saw that he sent about 100 emails. Here's what we're going to do to sort of remediate that. Here's how we're going to handle it, and here's how we're going to fix it. If I get that call at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going right into our contact management system. I'm like, let's get somebody from Families Forward on the line. Let's call the back office line. Let's get somebody on there. Let's get somebody figured out what we need to do to get ahead of this, right? So the nice thing is BlackPoint's average response time, and Nicole, I'm sure you've got the metrics and SLAs for this. I don't think we've ever waited longer than 3 or 4 minutes to actually have an account disrupted once they see an alert happen. They have been super, super fast on top of this, and that really limits a lot of the spray and damage.
Thank you.
All right,
Awesome.
cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thanks. It's a great question.
Yeah, no, Cecily, that definitely was something that I wanted to, make sure that everyone on the call understood was exactly what that looks like for you as the end customer. How does that communication eventually get to you? So yeah, thank you, Jim, for jumping in and kind of explaining how it works with Proper Sky. So I was gonna jump into a little bit around, how
Actually,
MDR.
real quick,
Oh, go ahead.
hold on. We have one other question. So the question was from Danny. She said, will we be setting up a call order? So part of what Michael's going to be doing, Danny, as part of the outreach is we're going to have like a point of escalation, like the category 5 hurricane phone call. Like that's what we're going to do. So you and Michael and whoever's going to be working with you, we're going to work up the call flow and how you guys want to handle this. So whether I'm calling you or Don or whoever, however that works.
Yeah, essentially on our end, we have a call tree that Proper Sky will, set up to be however it is that you will want it to be.
Yep.
Yep. So I was going to talk a little bit more about, kind of the functionality of the MDR. I know I talked about kind of what it is, but now I want to talk a little bit more about how it works. And I know, Cecily, thank you for that question. We did kind of already talk a little bit about what that would look like if the SOC did, end up taking some type of response for your network. So as Jim mentioned, we will start calling. When we take a response, we're always going to pick up the phone and start calling because we want to get a hold of somebody, make sure that they know, hey, this is what we saw, this is what we did, and this is what you maybe need to do just to, get things back up and running. So first thing that's going to happen when you come on as a customer with MDR, and I'm pretty sure everyone on this call, already is, there's going to be a very small, lightweight endpoint agent that gets deployed. So, Proper Sky team obviously would handle that. There's no, resources. It's not resource intensive or anything like that. It's all in the background. You don't have to reboot or anything like that. So it's a very silent install, very easy to deploy. They'll also configure the cloud side of things. So we'll have an API connection into the M365 tenant so that we are watching for that business email compromise. Then the Security Operations Center. So that's our team of analysts, 24/7 human beings. And I want to make sure to highlight it's humans. Obviously we have some AI built into the back end just to make things faster, make sure that our alerts are always the most actionable. But it is going to be a human that's going to be taking these responses because we're not at a point yet where, computers and AI are intelligent enough to make decisions about, isolating devices and killing processes or disabling users. So it's going to be a human being, and essentially we're going to be mapping out the entire network. So, if you're an organization and maybe you have 20 endpoints, so that's going to be desktops, servers, laptops, and they're spread out, even if people are working from home, whatever it is, we're going to be mapping out that entire network so we can actually see all of those devices in front of our Security Operations Center. We're also going to map out not just devices that have the agent, but we're also going to be able to see any devices out there that don't have the agent. So let's say you have maybe internet connected cameras or thermostats or refrigerators, everything these days is connected to the internet. Those are all also, potential ways that a hacker can get into the network. So we don't have an agent on those, but we still want to be able to see them. We still want to know if some kind of weird traffic is flowing from them. And actually a really good example of this and why it was so important for us is that there was a woman who she worked from home, she had her laptop, and apparently her son had jailbroken their Xbox at home. And so the Xbox no longer had any type of security mechanism on it. So a hacker was able to get onto the Xbox and then laterally spread to her laptop, her work laptop. And so luckily, we saw it as soon as it hit that laptop, we were able to, isolate that. And we were able to tell her where that malicious activity stemmed from. And so she could go and, throw that Xbox away, burn it, etc. So that's just an example of, there are ways that hackers can get into a network outside of just, somebody clicking an email or something like that. So yeah, it's very low false positive rate. Once again, having that human being in the process really makes sure that when we're taking a response, it's typically because it's for a very good reason. Not to say that there's never a false positive. That's, sometimes people travel, they don't tell anyone. Obviously, very important to let Proper Sky know if you're going to be traveling or anything like that, because then our Security Operations Center knows that you're expected to be in Greece next week or what have you. So yeah, not to say that there's never a false positive, but it is very limited. It's pretty rare that we are, disabling something for not a good reason. Travel exceptions, talked about that a little bit already, probably, and Jim, you can speak to it. Maybe, I don't know if you all have your customers reach out, letting you know when they're traveling, I'm guessing. Yes.
Usually when they're there. Yeah. So, hey, I'm in St. Lucia. I can't get my email. So it's fine.
Yeah, and I love it. I mean, I travel a lot for work, and sometimes I'll get a message. I forget to tell people that I'm trying because I'm doing it so much. So yeah, I was in Ireland recently, and my security operations center messaged me, and they were like, Nicole, we're about to disable your account, but before we do, is this you? I was like, I'm on my honeymoon. I'm in Ireland. So yeah, that's very, it's nice to know that somebody is watching out for me. And then let's see, enhanced vulnerability scanning and reporting reviewed. Yep. So, Jim, I might let you speak to that. But yeah, we do some vulnerability scanning, but I'm guessing, Jim, you guys do some vulnerability scanning. Correct?
Yeah, well, so this kind of is Michael could probably speak a little bit more about this, but yeah, so kind of there's like the Microsoft Windows patches, which are very easy. That's built into sort of all of our toolkit. Then there's other stuff like Chrome and Firefox and some other third-party tools that you guys use, we have some tools that sort of patch the major ones. But there's always this weird software. It's like, oh, hey, I have this recording software from the security camera that was developed in Wenzhou, China, and has Mandarin written, ActiveX controls, which has like 2 level 10 severity vulnerabilities on it, right? So like that's the kind of stuff. It's like, okay, we're going to put that software on this machine here, and we're going to keep that machine off of everything on the network and just plug it directly into the video camera. So that's the sort of stuff that we'll do to sort of manage some of these risks. And then also there's some tools out there that and BlackPoint's kind of rolling out some of this stuff too that's going to help manage this vulnerability management piece, which is sort of like all these third-party tools, like finding that Xbox, on the network, because there's a lot of stuff that are on these networks these days that we don't necessarily manage. And so getting a little bit of visibility into those things and then making sure they're safe is something that we can help you guys with.
Yep. Yep. So as Jim mentioned, there's going to be more to come on all of that front. So I'm sure down the road we'll probably have to do more webinars to get everybody up to speed. But yeah, MDR is definitely not only the protection of the environment, but also the preventative protection. Trying to make sure that you're identifying your risk and your vulnerabilities and all your assets. There's kind of, I like to refer to the NIST cybersecurity framework. Not sure if anyone here knows what that is, but it's, essentially a cybersecurity framework that the United States government said, really no matter what organization, no matter your industry, no matter your size, you really need to have these things in place. And there's 5 pillars to it. And there's asset visibility, making sure you know what the heck you're trying to cover and protect. Second, it's going to be hardening the network, so making sure that you're making it as difficult as possible for these criminals to get in. Next is detection, so being able to detect when somebody gets in. Next is response, being able to respond when somebody gets in. And then lastly is the recovery. Obviously, Godspeed, knock on wood, we don't want to get to that point where you have to recover from something, but it is important to have those things in place. And so Proper Sky, as a wonderful MSP, they do make sure that you as a customer do have all of those aspects in place to make sure that you're secure in today's landscape. So yeah, so I think I explained how it works. Does anyone have any more questions about how MDR works or kind of what the process would be? Did everything make sense so far? Seems like it. Okay, cool.
All right.
Well, then,
No news is
Jim,
good
I'll hand it
news.
back over to you.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to talk about some real world examples and kind of why we made this decision. Um, so one of the things that we've noticed recently, so there's less and less software being written, in my opinion, for ransomware. So ransomware is a whole separate thing. So let's just kind of ignore that for the sake of this discussion. So business email compromise. This happened to a one of our customers. The guy that was in charge of the CFO, clicked an email. They got access to his email account, and they realized that a lot of the security protections, some of the baseline security protections that we had in place had really hamstrung them. So they hung out inside that tenant for a very long time. They managed to keep this guy's session open for several months. And then what they ultimately ended up doing is they ended up figuring out that there were a couple of bank accounts and a couple of vendors that were critical to the organization that seemed to be they had less financial controls. This guy had more access to those files. And long story short, the bank fell down on its face in a lot of this, but a threat actor eventually sent a fake ID and said that they were another financial consulting firm. They wanted to give access to a bank account. And all of those emails were hidden because of the way the rules were set up. And so uh, at the end of the day, a lot of money was taken from this organization. And the way that they did it was incredibly sophisticated, right? And so us as the IT company, I mean, the first thing I did is like, oh my God, what did we do wrong? What could we have done better? And so after they did the analysis, the insurance company came back and said, listen, there's two things that you guys could have done better. The first thing is you could have um, purchased this additional Microsoft 365 license, which would have allowed only one person to log in at one time, right? And it's a specialty license. And he said it's a relatively new product, whatever. So I said, okay, well, that's good to know. We'll try to incorporate that function and feature set as we move forward for our customers. And he said the second thing is they weren't able to forward email out to a third party. They weren't able to send more than a certain number of emails, but they did create a couple of very small rules that went to these specific mailboxes that a normal user, and you guys do this every day. Like I do this every day. I get spam that I might want to read. I put it in my newsletter folder. Well, they had created a new folder called like accounting, and then they hid that folder underneath this other folder called conversations, and they redirected the mail to that conversations folder. That act is very, very simple, and we see it all day long in all the event logs. But the fact that they moved it underneath conversations was a red flag to the SOC at BlackPoint. And so once we got done with the insurance company, they said, you probably want to get an MDR company that can investigate this specific event and help you with these forwarding incidents. And so that was impetus number one, right? So we took that learning, and then we actually went back and implemented, BlackPoint. We turned up a lot of security controls as a response to this, but that was a big one. And our takeaway from that is you need to have, and most of this stuff, again, was all happening at 2 a.m., 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, it was really difficult to find a lot of this stuff. So that's one real world example, and that was an email compromise. The good news is,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
go. Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah.
I was just going to mention too that since we're on the topic of business email compromise, I wanted to mention that we do have a statistic in our security operations center that about 20% of the time when a customer is onboarding us, like as a cloud, security provider, they actually already have some type of business email compromise in place. Like they already are breached on the N365 side, and they don't know about it. So, 20% is I think a pretty high number for companies that already have a breach in place and they didn't even know about it. So it's very common.
That's a great example. I think the average duration for how long somebody is inside of a tenant has actually expanded. It used to be like 151 days. I think it's like 174 days now. So the amount of time that these guys actually have access to information is increasing because the tools are more sophisticated. You have to use, lateral spread. You have to use a bunch of other tools. And so that's a great point, right? So, and look, we're not a perfect organization. We're not going to stop all these threats. And anybody that promises you otherwise is not telling you the truth. So, all we can do is improve and pivot. The good news is these guys had fantastic cybersecurity insurance. The bank never should have authorized that person on the account. So it was a slam dunk case. But, we were fortunate. We were able to take that learning and really, pivot into it and then make this, bring it up right? The second one, and this is a client that we're in the process of taking over now. They actually had a SOC and they had a managed detection and response tool. And the company that was managing them was a company about well, they're much larger than us. Let's say they're 10 or 20 times larger than we are. They had their own security operations center. It was a 24/7 operation, and they had a very good reputation in the space. Well, it turns out that they weren't really doing their job. And so one of these servers was what's called brute forced. And so what they did is they found out that one of the accounts had a regular name like accounting, and they basically kept trying to log into this server every single day, 10 times a minute for a year and a half with random passwords. And guess what? Eventually, they figured out what the password was. They got into the machine, and the SOC caught them within 30 minutes, right? But what the SOC did not do is they did not go back and remediate the little tiny remote access tool that they dropped onto that server. And so for a period of 2 years, threat actors were routinely dropping in, doing an analysis, and laterally moving from server to server to server, and eventually beating this SOC out, right? And the reason why I bring this up is this is why we don't want to do this ourselves and why we can't do this ourselves. We need a partner that's in this space that really gets security and can respond quickly. One of the reasons that we partnered up with BlackPoint years ago is the guys that operate in this space, they're all ex-NSA and CIA spooks. The dudes that run these guys they get it. They understand what these adversaries are capable of, and they are the creme de la creme in terms of response. And the team and toolkits that they built are so far advanced, and the response times are so far advanced compared to some of the other organizations that we see. For us, this was kind of a slam dunk. Had we had BlackPoint in this particular customer's location, I promise you that that data exfiltration and that tool never even would have gotten dropped, because BlackPoint would have noticed that the machine was being brute forced 100 times a second and told us to take it off the internet and turn it off, which is really what that SOC should have done at step one, right? So this is kind of a reminder of the importance of like really having a good partner that you can go to that can help with these sorts of things. All right. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? All right. I hate to use the word spook, but I also like it. So it's kind of a weird one. All right. And then this is example 3, and this is far more likely to happen. Most of the people on this call probably already experienced this once or twice before. So what's happening now is there's something called session hijacking or email credential hijacking, right? The way that Microsoft 365 works, and you guys are all familiar with this, you got to put in a good email address, you got to put in a good password, and then you got to put in a multi-factor code, right? It pops up on your phone. You got to put the number 44 in. Okay. The way Microsoft works is it takes a hash 1, hash 2, hash 3, it adds them together and it creates a session hash. You have that session hash. That means you're authorized to access the web interface and to do the work that you need to do. What's happening these days is threat actors are actually copying that session hash out of your cookies or even your memory, and they're logging into your account with that session hash, right? So this is a story that just happened. This was after we had already made the decision. But one of our clients, we have a email spam filtering that we turn on for all of our clients. This particular client is co-managed, which means they have their own internal IT team. He went in and said, hey, we were expecting this email from this customer. I think this is the email that we're looking for. I'm going to let this go to Sharon's mailbox. So he hits OK, hits accept. Sharon says, oh, here's the document I was expecting from Mike, an attorney. I'm going to go ahead and click this thing. Well, she clicks the thing. It pops up on her screen and it asks her for her Office 365 account. And she's like, okay, I do this every day, 15 times a day. So she puts the Office 365 account in. And what she did in that moment is she literally gave the hackers access to her account. And within moments, and this was at 10:47. From 10:47 to 10:57, Sharon's account emailed 2,500 people and then was stopped for 3 minutes. And then once it hit 11 o'clock, the counter reset and she sent another 2,500 emails out within 10 minutes. And the reason why this happened was because we didn't have a party watching these particular accounts, right? So we hadn't fully deployed this tool. Had we deployed this tool, BlackPoint's response team would have noticed in that first 3 to 4 minutes that the account was compromised and literally disabled the account. They would have noticed that somebody was logging in twice from 2 different locations. They would have disabled her account, and that spread would have been limited to 25, let's say 250, 300 emails. So the damage would have been much less. Now, there's no way to sort of prevent this. There was a lot of things that went wrong with that. The IT guy shouldn't have let it out. We should have reviewed it. She shouldn't have put the two-factor code in if she wasn't logging in. We could have limited the emails. And so there's some lessons that we took away from this. But this is an attack that is going to continue to happen over and over again. And one of the things that really came out of this was the damage of the reputation, right? So Sharon actually ended up emailing 2,500 attorneys and paralegals and a whole bunch of other people the same thing that she opened up, which continues to spread throughout other organizations, right? So time is critical in these things, and we've learned that we just aren't able to respond quick enough the way that BlackPoint and another third party can.
Yeah, and I actually, Jim, earlier you kind of alluded to our SLAs which is our service level objective. I'm sorry, SLOs, service level objective when it comes to how quickly we typically respond to this kind of thing. I just realized I never actually touched on that. So I can kind of let everybody on the know that, or everyone on the call know that our SLO, so our service level objective, which is essentially, this is the time that we really attempt and we really want to be able to address these alerts and take responses. The time period for that is 15 minutes. So that's an alert coming through and then a SOC analyst responding to it. The reason it's an SLO is because, every threat is different. Every hacker is doing things differently these days. So we can't necessarily guarantee that it's always going to be under 15 minutes. Sometimes it will be longer. But Jim, to your point, most of the time it is less than that, but it just really depends on what the attack is. But yeah, for email compromises, it is typically within minutes, but of course there are cases where it takes a little bit longer, just depending on what they're doing and how fast they're moving.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us of the legal agreement that stands between us as well. So yes, Nicole was correct. So we would never guarantee more than 15 minutes, and that's just an objective. We try to meet that most of the time. But in the reality, the perspective that we've had so far is BlackPoint's been super responsive, particularly for critical events. And these email compromises, like they're easy to they're getting harder, but they're relatively easy to identify and respond pretty quickly. So cool. All right, those are my 3 examples and kind of, part of what we did here. So key takeaways, and then we'll leave it up for questions. Cyber threats are increasing. This is just going to continue to happen, and it's just going to get more and more sophisticated. Nobody gets out alive. Anybody that tells you that you're not going to have a security incident and they can guarantee you that it's not true. We're very good at what we do, and we have seen some things, particularly these last few years. And I can tell you, having done incident response myself personally on 3 separate events now, I can guarantee you that those owners, they've told me, I would have paid $500,000 to never have this happen to me in my life ever. Like when you walk into your organization and everything is shut down, it is a world of hurt, and it's just there's a lot there to deal with. Not even from any of the financial repercussions, the operational, just the emotional damage and toll, and the way that it upends your entire life. It's really, really something that you need to avoid. Really. With the addition of AI, we're going to see it's super easy for people to vibe code this stuff, get ChatGPT to write your code over and over again until it bypasses a bunch of the normal filters. And so we're going to see an increasing complexity in these attacks and sophistication. I don't see that. It's going to be an arms race, I think, for a long period of time between the white hats and the black hats. And that's the guys that are protecting your network and the guys that are going after your network. But to this day, most of these attacks are still happening with off-the-shelf tools. You got, hey, I just needed to install WebEx to join one of my clients' networks. And well, you got WebEx on there and you forgot your password because you haven't used it in 2 years. That's how they're getting in, right? It's right through the front door. It's not through these crazy tools a lot of times. And then we're adding MDR, and we're making it a requirement because it's the right thing to do for our customers, right? So the cost versus the impact and risk mitigation is a no-brainer. I mean, I can give you the spreadsheet. We ran through the numbers. Like we worked out a wonderful deal with BlackPoint. They were very accommodating for us because we agreed to standardize this across the board because we know it's the right thing for our clients. And MDR is the way forward. And we think it's the best thing to do for you guys. And as always, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? So I think that's the big takeaway we've got. All right, so fire away. Any other questions? None.
We explained everything so well.
As is always the case, people are
I could
checking their
use-
emails and stuff.
If I could use my computer correctly and unmute myself, yes, I do have a couple questions. Will you assist us in announcing this and helping us explain what this is to our end users so they're not like, oh my gosh, I'm being watched 100% of the time?
Yes, absolutely. And to be honest with you, Danny, there's no way they'd be able to watch everybody 100% of the time. So and I'll give you a little bit more insight in the way that their toolkit works. So BlackPoint's tool looks at processes, right? So stuff that's literally running on your computer. And if so, a great example of this is if somebody in the marketing department runs PowerShell, the first thing that their team is going to look at is like, why is somebody from marketing running PowerShell, right? And then they're going to look at what that PowerShell is doing, and they're going to say, hey, this is trying to mount something on a server. That's an anomalous behavior. Let's jump into this. They don't know like what they're working on or what websites they're going to or anything along those lines. It's really just what is a process trying to do in access. So
Okay.
I'm happy to explain that. And I'm happy to hop on a call for you guys or any of that stuff just to explain like this isn't Big Brother type stuff. We can't see what you're doing. We don't care. Really, I don't care. That's Danny's problem.
And then the other question I have is we currently have cyber insurance. Is this something that I should report to our insurance company that we are installing and going to begin using?
Yes. And in fact, we should probably, and this is something you want to bring up with Michael on the QVR, is typically we'll see the premiums come down a little bit if you tell them that you have a SOC or a MDR, right? And so that's one of the things that we can do. The other thing too is we partnered up with TechRug. There's a lot of little gotchas in these cybersecurity policies now that we're learning about. Like, oh, okay, yeah, you have cybersecurity, but you don't have wire fraud, or your wire fraud coverage is only $100,000, and this was somebody who siphoned off 250,000. So you're out of pocket for 250. The other thing is
we were smart and had you guys review it before we signed it.
awesome, perfect, excellent, good.
I think that's the only questions I had.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for asking questions. It makes me feel better, and I appreciate that, Danny. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep. All right. Cool. All right. Well, we got 5 minutes left in the meeting. We can stare at each other, be quiet. It's up to you. Oh, Andrew's typing there. What do we got, Andrew? Will their recording be available? Yes, we'll send the recording. I can also nerd out, send you guys a spreadsheet and the data slicks if you guys want them. So just ask Andrew for them. So we've got the 3 reports from the insurance companies. Some interesting data in there, but the big scary ones I included that are a bit more practical as well. But I'm happy to share this recording. In fact, I think we'll probably throw this up on our YouTube page. I don't think there's anything proprietary in here that we'd have to hide. We'll just double check that, Andrea. But anyway, we'll make sure you get a copy of this if you want it. All right. Let's take these 5 minutes and think about our Halloween costumes and what we're going to be doing this weekend.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
so much.
Jim.
All right, guys. You got it. Have a great one, everybody. Take care.
You do the same. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.